Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 21. Today I'm joined by Chad and Matt of Exodus Outdoor Gear. We're talking game camera strategies, what's new with Exodus Outdoor Gear, and a buck named Caesar, so stay tuned. All right, welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. You are listening to episode number 21, and I am your host, Clint Campbell. And today we're joined by Matt and Chad from Exodus Outdoor Gear. Chad, this will be his second time on the show, a two-time offender here at the Truth from the Stand Podcast, and Matt's inaugural journey on the podcast. Looking forward to chatting with those guys. We'll be talking a lot about camera strategies. Matt and Chad were both part of filming a hunt that you can see on the Sportsman's Channel, going after a buck named Caesar, so I'm looking forward to getting the scoop on that. I did have a chance to run into these fellas while I was at the outdoor show here back in February. Had a great time with those guys. It's always good catching up with them and cutting up, so I'm looking forward to the conversation today. We'll keep this intro short. Of course, I'm usually joined by my sidekick, Phil Marchek. Hoping that he'll be back on the show here soon. He'll have some big news when he does come back, so I'm anticipating he should be back in the next week or so. And with a little bit of housekeeping here before we dive into the phone conversation with Matt and Chad, is that we will be giving away another Exodus trail camera during the course of this episode. So much like the previous giveaway, a lot of the steps will be the same, but at some point during this episode, we'll give out the requirements or the instructions to enter in that drawing for a free Exodus Lift trail camera. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get Matt and Chad dialed into the line. But first, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners at Whitetail Institute for the Food Plot Tip of the Week. Today, John shares a few thoughts on creating hunting and congregation food plots.
Yeah, sure. The main consideration there is you want deer to feel safe using the plot, especially during daylight hours. If they don't feel safe, they're not going to use a food source, no matter how good it is, except maybe at night. And there are a couple of different kinds of plots, probably more than that, but the two basic ones, some folks call them a destination plot. I prefer to call them a congregation plot. And that's if you have enough if you have enough land to where you can put a centrally located plot, and then that's the congregation plot, and then just don't hunt it at all, or maybe very rarely during the rut. And the deer figure out pretty quickly that's a safe zone, and they head for it. And then you stagger little hunting plots between the bedding areas and the destination plot. If you have a really big piece of land, almost always you can divide it up, on a map into chunks and make each one its little own community like that.
And that, folks, is a Whitetail Institute tip of the week. Be sure to head over to whitetailinstitute.com to check out all their products, including their new Imperial Whitetail Beets and Greens. This is a new product just released that contains a blend of kale, turnips, and radishes, along with sugar beets for attractiveness. This type of forage is ideal for early fall through late winter to help deer through those hard winter months. And now back to the show. All right, folks, we are back. You're listening to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, and I am your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 21. And today, I am joined by my good friends from Exodus Outdoor Gear, Chad and Matt. Chad is what we'll call a two-time offender here on the Truth from the Stand Podcast. There's no sentences that come along with that as of yet, but I'm sure we could probably work something out. But how you doing, fellas?
Doing good, Clint.
Good.
Yeah, we're doing good, man.
Good, man. It's been a little while, man. I know we got to run into each other here back in February. It was good to catch up with you guys at the show. You've been doing a little bit of a tour lately, huh?
Yeah, man. It's been exhausting, but it's been good. We've been on the road for, I don't know, probably 10, 11 weeks now. So we have one more to go, and we have we'll have a little break. So we're looking forward to that.
Nice. Where's the next one at?
Madison, Wisconsin.
Madison, Wisconsin. Very nice. You guys were just in Ohio, right?
Yes, we were just in Columbus, our backyard, last weekend.
Nice. So I'm sure you guys got a lot of local family love at that one, right?
Yeah, it's always good to be in your home state and see so many existing customers and listen to their testimonies and success stories of, last season and how they're using their cameras, and it's just good to put faces with the names.
Right, absolutely. So the big question is since you guys have been doing the outdoor show circuit here, have you had any time to get out and do any shed hunting or get into the outdoors at all, or has it just been grind after grind these past few months?
It's been tough, man. We we really stepped up our trade show circuit this year, over top of what we did last year, and we actually just kind of shared some of the story the other day. Chad and I and a couple friends spent a lot of miles looking for a deer I shot last fall. That Caesar deer that they kind of aired the story of on the Sportsman channel the other night with our friends The Life. Other than that, man, we really haven't had much time to get out. We kind of been beating ourselves up a little bit about it, but frankly, we never seem to find very many sheds in Ohio anyways. It's just such a big woods type of environment that seems like we do our best when we're in Illinois or Iowa or somewhere like that. So no, honestly, we haven't had much time at all this year, and I think the one day that we did search, Chad found one or two, and that's about it.
Yeah, I wish I was able to blame the big woods on my lack of shed finding, but I think, is just a complete lack of shed finding skill. Unfortunately, I don't know that it's going to get any better. It's part of my problem is every time I go out, it turns into a scout instead of a shed hunt where I'm looking at for rubs and stuff like that rather than keeping my eyes on the ground. Unfortunately, but
it's funny because I always thought that I was a really bad shed hunter until I went and shed hunted one time in Illinois, and I realized that it's not necessarily always a skill thing. Sometimes when you're tripping over them, it's too hard not to find them.
Right. Yeah. I saw a post of our buddy John Mulligan where it looked like he went out for like an hour and stumbled on like 7 in like an hour, and I've never found one in my life.
I feel so bad for John. He keeps sending me all those pictures.
I know, right? Live in Iowa, stumbling over sheds. It's a pretty rough life he's got going on out there. But so what's I was curious to ask, because I know you guys are doing the circuit, and you guys are kind of the grizzled veterans of the outdoor show circuit now. I'm always curious to know at these large kind of public events, because I know, Matt, you and I are kind of swapping stories when we caught up in February about just playing music and stuff like that, and there's always interesting stories coming off the road when you're in a band and stuff. And I'm going to imagine that you guys probably have an interesting story or something interesting that happened during the trade show run. So what's your favorite part of doing these shows, and anything weird or out of the ordinary that you've seen?
Well, the Jurassic Classic always gets a little weird, but that's just a fun time, and that's kind of a little bit different. That kind of mixes the old music days back with the trade show circuit, but it's fun. It's nothing like you and I collectively have spent a lot of time together, or not together, but time on our own, each of us on the road playing music, and that that area is a lot different than what it is in the outdoor industry trade show circuit. We've all kind of grown up and we're adults now, but no, we do get some characters, I think, sometimes that just don't know about our brand, that kind of they start serving beer at some of these things at like 10 a.m. So it's kind of funny sometimes, but nothing too crazy. I mean, I think some of the stories from the music days are probably a lot crazier than the ones from the trade show circuit, but the Jurassic Classic always has some funny events.
Yeah, I bet. I know the one that I had seen while I was at the outdoor show there in Harrisburg was the guys that had the bow booth that was kind of catty corner from where you guys were. I think it was Gearhead, those small little kind of tactical bows. And there was I was actually talking to John, and I turned around and I heard this guy kind of talking about the bow, and I just kind of happened to turn around, and it was an older gentleman, and he was checking out the bow, and he was really kind of giving it a once over, and he goes to start to pull it back, and I'm watching him, and he's really kind of struggling and shaking to pull it back, and I'm like, man, if he gets that thing back, this isn't good news. And I'm standing there watching. I could see the guy in the booth trying to grab the bow from him. And as he was trying to grab the bow from him, the older gentleman got the bow all the way back. Man, his fingers slipped and just dry fired that thing in front of the entire booth. And the guy behind the booth's jaw dropped, and I think he was afraid he just blew up a $1,500 bow in front of everybody. But
Wow.
yeah, that was pretty good. But it was the funny part was that you could see it coming from a mile away. Like I watched it happen for probably like a minute and a half, and I was like, yeah, this is gonna happen. But you had mentioned just a couple minutes ago, when we first started talking, of some work that you guys did with the folks from The Life. I know you guys have released at this point a film on the Sportsman's Channel. And you were chasing a deer that you had mentioned, named Caesar. So can you give me a little bit of because honestly, I've not been able to see that yet. I don't have cable, so I'm kind of waiting until I can find it somewhere in a digital space. Can you give us I guess a little taste of what that story is about?
Yeah, for sure. Well, honestly, right about the same time we started Exodus, Chad and I met actually on a whitetail lease in southern Ohio, and one of the things that kind of we sacrificed whenever we started Exodus was we had to give up our kind of dream deer lease down in southern Ohio, and kind of put all extra expenses into starting the company that year, and so we kind of banded together, one on the company side, and then two, we decided we were going to hunt public land that year, and I guess as long as we had to, we kind of took on that adventure in Ohio in 2015, and one of the first places we looked at down in this area that I now live was just a really cool saddle coming off of a main ridge in this big woods area that I hunt, and Chad and I hunt. And we kind of picked it out on Google Earth and decided to go in and check it out. And it was like a 3-mile round trip to go in and check this little spot out that we kind of want to look at. And when we got to where we kind of pinpointed on Google Earth, it was like one of the coolest setups that I had seen in those woods. And there were giant rubs coming out of what we kind of figured was a bedding area, going down to the saddle. And at the time when we were scouting, there was about 3 inches of snow on the ground, so we didn't know. But when I come back a few months later, in that saddle was just a giant main scrape area. And it was some of the best sign that we found on this piece of public land at the time. And so hopes were kind of high that that would be one of the spots that we really focused on the next year, and put some cameras in there. And in 2015, I went and checked cameras there on November 3rd, and it was kind of funny that morning it was one of those kind of heat waves in November where, you get a 70-degree day in November and everybody's kind of complaining. And so that morning I kind of did a coin toss whether I should go into the stand or if I should kind of wait it out and hunt some exterior stands. And I don't remember what the coin toss said, but I remember last night being like, you know what? I'm not going to risk it on a 70-degree day. Well, that day at noon, I went in and checked this camera, and there was a giant typical 9 in there in broad daylight at 8 o'clock that morning. Just beams for days, incredible 9 length, just a really special deer. And I was kind of kicking myself in the butt for not going in there after him that morning. And that's where the story of this deer we call Caesar started. We were hunting another big deer that year, and I just never really, I think I hunted him twice that first year, and we never really kind of went in after him. We were busy focused on another big deer across about 10 miles away. And this year going into it, after that other big deer had been killed, it was kind of the number one deer that I could think of wanting to get on, and had a lot of daylight pictures of him last year, and kind of scouted all year for him this year, and thought I knew where he was bedding, and we put some cameras up in the summertime. Never got a picture of the deer, and then it was one of those things where I just had a feeling that he was going to do the same thing that he did the year before and show up in the first week in November. And this year November 3rd came and passed, and I don't remember if I ever even hunted. It was kind of a similar story as warm weather, and Chad came down and we hunted the morning of the 4th. And then lunchtime, we were kind of contemplating where we should be, and we checked the camera for Chad to go and hunt that evening, and there wasn't really much showing up on it. And I told Chad, I said, we should go check Caesar's camera and see if he showed back up yet. It was about this time last year, and went in there that morning, or that afternoon about 1 o'clock. Checked the camera. We had stands on the back, and checked the camera. The deer had showed up that night before, about 2 hours after dark. First pictures we'd gotten of them all year. Hung the stands, got in the stands, and I checked my phone, and I realized that it was a red moon night, and I was kind of, this past year I've been kind of, I've been really experimenting with the whole red moon thing and the hunter's moon thing, and we kind of jokingly were laughing that, hey, it's a red moon tonight, 5:30, I think it was, and we're kind of feeling good about the potential for that set. And man, I'll be danged if it was about 10 minutes before the red moon, we caught a glimpse of that deer, and Chad said, there he is. And I looked over, and he was at 30 yards, and came in and worked a scrape at 20 yards, and then kind of threw us through a loop and came directly at us, which we never expected. And we were in the only two trees that we could really fit in, and they were tiny. And I think I was about 10 or 11 feet off the ground. Chad was maybe a foot higher than me, and we had this 160 couple inch deer coming directly at us, being about 6 feet over his back. And I'm at full draw. I drew on this deer when he came to the scrape, and he's coming straight at me. I'm at full draw, and didn't really know what to do. And and as I go swing to follow the deer as he goes broadside, there's a limb right in front of me, and I can't get around it. And so we kind of had a little bit of a mishap there. I had to let my bow back down, let the deer get out past us another 10 yards or so. And the whole time Chad's kind of, I'm sure in his mind, wondering what the heck I'm doing. And I'm, we got this 160-inch deer at 4 yards, and I can't get a shot at him. And anyway, so I stand up and turn back around and kind of get all discombobulated, and finally redraw on this deer. And he kind of magically turns back towards me a little bit and gives us that last opportunity, and I shot. And honestly, that night we celebrated like we had just killed a giant, and I thought that we had. And we went, we found the last 4 inches or 6 inches of the arrow that came out, whenever we shot. And the other side of the arrow was lodged in him, and just looked like a good shot. It felt like a good shot, and the way the deer reacted, it just seemed like a dead deer. And we found the arrow trailed him a little bit that night, and then we went home, kind of celebrated, and planned to come back in the next morning. And we went back in the next morning, and it was one of those things where you kind of your ambitiousness slowly starts to fade as you start to get really worried with a deer of that caliber, and it did. And then all day we searched for the deer and searched for him for weeks after that, and turned into, now we've been searching for him for months and just haven't found him. And man, it's one of those things where it's been a roller coaster of emotions, but it's a deer that whether we ever find him or not, or whether he shows back up next year or not, it's one we'll certainly never forget. It's had a pretty big impact on us this year.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's an incredible story, and it's one of those things where sometimes it's the ones that it's the near misses that teach us the most. Maybe, you know what I mean? It's
oh yeah,
and and I would say the next toad you lay down probably has a lot to do with the experience you had with this one for sure. Because those old mature deer, man, they're wiry, and if we ever think we have them fooled for a minute, we're just kind of lying to ourselves, I believe. But that's an incredible story, man. So, who was filming that?
Chad.
Yeah,
I'll tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah. So where did you get your filming skills, man? I didn't know you laid down tape.
I learned from the best, Mr. Matt Klein. It was man, I tell you what, that morning, as Matt said, we went out and we hunted a set, 5 or 6 miles from where we were set up on Caesar, and we saw 2 or 3 different bucks that morning. And the whole time, like, I'm just in a mad panic trying to get these deer in frame and trying to get everything in focus, and I was just having a heck of a time. I'm thinking to myself, when a deer of one of our target deer we actually have an encounter with one of our target deer, there is no way that I'm going to be able to lay down footage that's going to be usable. I mean, I was a mess. And that evening, for whatever reason, it was, I don't know, everything just worked out, everything. And I probably couldn't do it again if you asked me to. And it's just, like I said, it was one of those things. It was probably a little bit luck, a little bit of fate, and it was an incredible shot. As Matt said, that deer came in over top of a ridge and worked that scrape, and there was a solid 2 minutes of footage in 4 feet or 4 yards from the base of our trees. So if you've seen the setup, you would. There was no way it should have happened, but it did.
It's some of the most incredible footage I've ever seen. Honestly, it's we played it. It's one of those things, the highs and lows of deer hunting. We played that footage back that night, and it was like God was just handing us one on a silver platter, because it was like we had been through a lot that season already. It was already a long season for me, just kind of battling through some stuff and trying to really, we've had this quest to killing a giant on public land, and we've been battering against the wall trying to make it happen. And so when that one happened that night, and then the footage was just absolutely incredible. So we go back and watch the footage that night. It was like, oh my gosh, the stars are aligning. Like, we have to find that deer in the morning. And, there's just the highs and lows of deer hunting. And then you go back in the next morning, it's like your world's shattered.
Right. So Chad, the question is it more nerve-wracking being in a tree with a camera and your buddy drawing down on your target deer, a giant, and having the pressure of trying to capture the film, or are you more stressed out when you're behind the bow?
Oh my gosh, I was so much more stressed out behind running the camera. So I mean, it was that's not really forte. I don't have a knack for those kinds of things, but just having the pressure of knowing, okay, if we do get an opportunity, like, everything has to be perfect for us to be able to use the footage, and make sure you get the kill shot, make sure everything's in focus, make sure your audio's on, make sure you pan back to Matt after we do get an encounter. So it was, and I went through the roof. I think I was probably more excited than Matt. I mean, in the original footage, you could hear me breathing. It was pretty intense. And I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty epic.
So what's super cool about this is, like, obviously you guys had history with this deer. And then the fact that, that you were both in the tree laying down the footage and behind the bow. Right. And then if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Matt Klein also tickled the six string a little bit for this show too, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, sir?
Well, not for this show.
No.
That's for a new project those guys are working on. So, same show, but not for this episode.
All right, but you did lay some tracks that we'll be able to go that we'll get some audio of here in the near future, right?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, actually, I'm pretty excited about that.
Nice.
Kind of coming off of a 7-year hiatus from all that. So
nice. I'm looking forward to of catching a peek of that for sure. So with that being said, I know you guys are diving in, you guys are doing a lot of public land hunting and so forth, but do you guys have any plans for any adventure hunts, what I'll call adventure hunts in 2017? Any trips you're planning to make, or are you guys going to kind of stay in the area you've been kind of hunting the past couple of years and focusing on the public land there in Ohio?
Well, I don't really have any adventure hunts, I guess. To me, that's kind of, I think of, Western style hunts, elk hunts, headed off to the mountains. So nothing of that nature. Of course, we'll hit it hard October, November in the whitetail world. Whether obviously here in Ohio, and possibly maybe Kentucky, maybe Illinois. So nothing's really slated in the books, but knowing us, I'm sure we'll be in a few different states.
Right.
Well, I got to share because Chad doesn't know about this yet, but it's.
I love it. We're getting the drop here. Good stuff.
Well, first of all, Chad forgot to mention New Zealand. We got to go there sometime.
Oh.
Yeah.
We want to go hunt whitetails in New Zealand in like April when they're rutted. So that would be a fun one, but it's probably not this year. But it's funny too because we've been so. I hate to sound cliche because everybody's busy, but we've been so busy the last 2 years with trying to grow this company, and you sacrifice a lot when you leave a secure job to try to do something like this. So we've been pretty humble with our hunting time and really try to make the most of it when we get time to. And I think this year might even be more so because of all the new things we're trying to bring to light. But there is one thing that actually I'm pretty excited about, and Chad knows my good friend Paul, who is a friend from back home that just freaking puts down giants on Ohio public land every single year. He's one of those guys that just everybody wants to kind of take notes from. And Chad, he sent me a picture yesterday of a giant in Kentucky on one of the it's on a farm that somebody he knows down. I'm talking like 200 plus inches, Chad.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
It's on a farm that somebody he knows, like, it's a relative or something. He got pictures of last year, and he's got the coordinates, and all the surrounding land is public land, but it's like kayak access only. So it's a little sneak peek of what we might be spending time doing here come November 10th or so.
Yeah, that
sounds
awesome.
like a worthy objective.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know why stuff like that gets me going. It's like, it might only work out like one every 10 years. It seems to be my track record right now. But when you finally kill deer in situations like that, it's like, that's a good story,
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to go ahead now and just volunteer my my camera running services for you on that, in case you might need them.
you just play the guitar as we float down in the kayak.
We'll just serenade those deer right to the kayak, man. We won't even have to get out. We'll be good. We'll just take them from the water. That's cool that you mentioned New Zealand. It's funny you mentioned that because my wife and I were just talking about hunts, and I was just mentioning that I wanted to travel a little bit more. If I can. And, I know we talked a little bit whenever we were hanging out at the outdoor show that I'm headed to Montana for a 2-week DIY elk hunt. And, she was mentioning she's always wanted to go to New Zealand. And I was like, let's do it. It's like, let's just make sure we go during hunting season. That way I can try to get a hunt in while we're over there, vacationing. But the one thing that we started talking about doing was just, with flexibility, with what I do for work and stuff, that I don't have to necessarily be tied to a location all the time. Because I want to explore the opportunity to try to work remotely like 2 months out of the year. Now, unfortunately, it wouldn't be during hunting season, but like during the summer, and go live in Montana for a month or two every year, and just kind of be able to do some scouting and live out west for a couple months every year and enjoy the outdoors. Since I do have some flexibility, but we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. Does that sound like a good plan to you guys?
Dude, you better do that.
That's sweet, man.
Yeah, I know, right? I just got to figure out, like, work doesn't know yet, so I have to break it to them at some point, so we'll figure out how that...
Oh, they're probably listening right now.
I know, right? It's like, if they are, it's like, hey, I really like my job. I'd like to stick around for a while. So I know you guys had just mentioned...
You'll get your boss...
Oh, what's that?
Your boss will call you into the office, and I said your boss will call you in the office and be like, hey, listen to the podcast, and... No, that's a no.
Yeah, exactly. They actually have checked it out. It's funny. They've actually asked me about it a couple different times. It was actually right after I got back from my rut hunt in Ohio and got that nice deer, and then Mark, of course, from Wired to Hunt, was nice enough to publish the article and stuff like that for me, and they actually saw it and they just got excited that someone had like a passion that they were actively pursuing and stuff. And so, they read the article and they were happy that I was, having a good time and so forth, and happy for me. And then I never said anything about the podcast or whatever, because, I live in a relatively urban area, so I'm not sure who all's, okay with hunting or not okay with hunting. And, I don't want to necessarily rock the boat while I'm at work. If they ask me about it, I'll talk to them about it, but I usually don't actively bring it up just to avoid any conflict in the workplace. And so the one owner comes up to me. He's like, hey, I heard you have a podcast. And I was like, yeah, I do. And he was like, what's it about? And I was like, oh, it's about hunting. And he got real interested in it, started talking to me about it, and was super excited about the fact that I think they get excited about their employees doing something outside of work that they're passionate about, to make sure that they're not burning out at work, which I think is
absolutely,
which I think is really cool. And I don't know that every employer takes that kind of interest in the folks that work for them. So that was nice. But getting off topic here, I want to make sure that
you guys hiring
I know, right? Yeah, you guys looking well. I'll swap you. I'll swap you like a project management position for some Ohio hunting access, or for some GPS coordinates from you guys. Sounds like a fair trade.
There you go.
But so I know you guys, Matt, you had mentioned, you guys are really busy, and I know that, firsthand just from talking to you guys. Just especially with the this time of year, especially whenever you guys are, on the trade show circuit and so on and so forth. But, I just want to make sure that you're going to have an opportunity to get out and chase some longbeards, because that is fast approaching. I think for Ohio, what you guys got, 3, maybe 4 weeks before it comes in yet?
Yeah, I think we're like the 21st or 24th this year. It's a little bit later this year, and honestly, April is like our busiest month. We got a lot of stuff going on in April, but rest easy. We will at some point.
Yeah, I've
be chasing some kings of spring.
Yeah, I've been working the mouth call, and the wife is loving my practice regimen right now. Just so she's not. I think that falls second, right underneath the elk bugle that I've been hitting in the house once in a while too. I think the turkey call is just a notch below that in terms of annoyance. But so
what do your neighbors think of that, Clint?
We're not going to go into the neighbor realm. We could do a whole podcast on that maybe, because let's just say the relationship is strained. Let's say we might need counseling.
Understood.
Possibly. So speaking of, again, you guys being super busy with your busy month coming up here in April, I wanted to, ask you guys, I know we've been kind of talking about it for a little while. I know I've been asked about it just online in the social media space with folks asking me, and I heard people asking as they were coming to the booth whenever I spent some time with you guys at the outdoor show. So if you wouldn't mind, could we get a little sneak peek as to what's new with Exodus, and is there a Gen 2 launch of a camera here around the corner in the not so distant future?
Yeah, actually it's funny because one of the big things everybody's asked us here in this year's trade show circuit is what's to come, and what our plans are. And it's kind of fun for us because when we launched this company, it really truly was a grassroots kind of movement for us to really want to see a better product on the market and want to see a better company behind their products. And the way that's been received since we've kind of launched from day one in May of 2015 has been, honestly, it's been humbling. It's been one of those things that it really has kind of lit a fire and kind of resonated with why we do what we do, and people have kind of gotten our message and our branding and what we do, and the cool thing about that is it's allowed us to kind of expand our resources now for the last 2 years and really get to a place where we can kind of take things to the next level, I guess you'd say, and really try to kind of move towards an industry innovator instead of just, putting in products. And it starts with Lift Mark II, which is our second generation of the Lift, which was our debut camera a couple years back. And we are in the final testing and production stages of that camera now. We're about probably 4 weeks away from it going out for orders, and we're really excited about that one. And the big thing with the Lift Mark II is that it truly takes everything that we did with the Lift and just kind of literally across the board takes it to the next level. So the big things that you'll see changing is a complete overhaul of our detection circuit. One of the things when we launched the cameras on day one was that we wanted a really solid detection circuit, and we felt like in our testing, in order to do that, we didn't have the fastest detection circuit because we wanted consistency. Well, with the Lift Gen 2, we've kind of taken the consistency approach as well as the fast trigger time approach, and we've got one of the best trigger detection circuits on the market. The Lift Gen 2 is clocking about 0.3 to 0.4 seconds right now, and that'll kind of be finalized here in the next week or two. It's a really fast camera. It's really consistent. Our flash range and the detection range is going to get just a little bit further. So we're moving from about 50 feet to 60 to 65 feet. Again, these are things that we are kind of final testing as we move into the production stage. Things tend to change just a little bit as you go from prototypes to production, and we're working through that right now. But we expect most of these stats to stay the same. Our battery life is going to be about 20% longer. 15 to 20% longer. We're pretty pumped about that because that's one thing we actually felt pretty solid about before. And then one of the cool things that we're really excited about is just the HD video quality that we're going to be putting out with the Lift Mark II. We've been side-by-side testing this thing over the last month and a half with a lot of other trail cameras in the market, as well as point-of-view cameras, in the filmmaking / TV production world. And this camera is off the charts, really, really high-quality video, and we're pretty excited to see where these things go. One of the things with running a trail camera company is you get to see a lot of cool stuff. You send out cameras one by one, and they go all over the world, and you see some really cool stuff come back. We've got cameras in North Pole, Alaska. We've got them in South America, Africa, Europe, and Asia. And you see some really cool animals, and you see some cool landscapes that come back through to our office. And we're really excited with this new HD video for the level and the quality of videos we're going to get to see of places and of animals that we can only dream of in extremely high definition videos. So those are kind of the big core features of Lift Gen 2. We're also launching a brand new camo pattern, which we think is honestly the best camo pattern on the market for trail camera as far as just blending into most of the environments that we put them in here in the whitetail world, and taking it to that next level on that end. That's it's kind of our big headliner item here in the first half of this year. And then we've got some cool stuff coming in the fall, hopefully, as well.
Nice. That's awesome, man. It's crazy when you say that you're going to get, in that 20% range increase in battery life, because the battery life in these already are top notch. So I think my Exodus cameras, I have the same set of batteries in that I initially put in them in October, and they're still running. Like, so, and it's on, and they're on like high traffic food sources. So it's like I'm getting a pretty heavy dose of images. And I think the last time I checked was February, like mid-February, and I think I was still at like 50% battery life on that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's like I can definitely attest to the battery life. So one question I do have is in the video, just so I have an understanding, so folks who are listening have an understanding, what does that do to your battery life? Just to kind of give me an idea. So it's like if a normal set of batteries, following all the guidelines for using the proper type of batteries and stuff, gives you X amount of months, or if we quantify it by X amount of pictures, how much does that reduce whenever you go into video?
Well, it really doesn't reduce it. It's just that you have to look at it in the fact that when you're running HD video, and I mean the new level of video that we're putting out is very high quality. When you're running HD video, you're taking 30 pictures per second. So you run that over the course of 30 seconds. And you're getting a lot of pictures there. I don't know what that is. What's that, like 9,000 or something like that?
Is that it?
900. Yep.
Look at that math on the deer hunting podcast. We do it all here, folks.
Yeah. Don't quote me on math. But anyways, you're taking a lot of pictures in a short amount of time. So I think you're getting about the same amount of pictures. It's just it doesn't register, when you're looking at it in a video sense that you're taking that many pictures. So
right, because when you're talking about video, you're really talking about frames per second, right? And so it's like what is it? Usually like 24 to 30 frames per second, depending on what device you're using and what you have it set at, roughly.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep, and those are a lot lower resolution, total resolution photos than say a 12 megapixel photo. Even though it's interpolated, there's still a lot more data there. So it's not 100% the same, but you can look at it a lot in the same way, in the sense that you're going to get your batteries are going to be eaten through a lot faster, even though you're getting a very similar amount of data. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. And once you mentioned I never thought of it that way. So I never thought of it in terms of, one frame equaling one picture, and I never really put the logic together to kind of understand it. But once you kind of explained it, it absolutely makes 100% sense. So I thought what could be interesting, here now that we've got some info about the Gen 2 camera is, some folks who may be, let's call them, maybe new to the camera realm, or those who are getting new properties that are looking to kind of use cameras to kind of investigate what's going on a new property. I'm kind of in that type of situation where I just came up on a new piece of property, or I didn't come up on it. My dad actually purchased a piece of property. So back home, I've never hunted it. He's never hunted it. I'm actually spending some time with him this weekend to scout it for the first time, and want to obviously put some cameras on it just to kind of see, obviously that nothing is holding, or hopefully isn't holding it at this point still, but at least seeing how the deer are using the property. But the whole place is completely foreign to me. So I thought we might want to go through a scenario where we're talking about a new piece of property and some of maybe the do's and don'ts, or where we want to put cameras and some of the strategies to kind of use cameras on a property that you don't have a lot of familiarity with. So if you guys are going to a new piece of property that you've never been on, like what's the first place or the types of locations you're looking to place cameras just to kind of get an inventory?
I guess, if you're in an agricultural region, for me, with most guys really starting to use trail cameras heavy, around Memorial Day weekend, kind of the start of summer, start of Velvet Fest. For me, it's destination ag fields or destination food plots. So high quality food sources, water holes, ponds if they're available, and then obviously with our background, in the big woods, using those terrain features, saddles, benches, and such, and then clear cuts. So for a new property, that's kind of where it starts, and then it's taking inventory and then repositioning as you get your results in after that first couple card pulls.
Right. I think the one thing I would maybe add to that I've done in the past, at least, is just if you can use any type of bait or mineral stations and stuff like that. I've found a couple areas on one of the farms that I hunt that I didn't have a lot of familiarity with at first. Building some mineral stations just to kind of near what I would consider to be a food source, to see if I could get some things to pass by that, just to kind of do a quick inventory to see if there was anything that I wasn't capturing on any of my other cameras. But I think that you're right. It's, especially if you're in ag land, it's like those food sources are kind of the prime spots to be. Especially if you're just going to inventory, and it makes nice pictures too, so it's always nice to kind of see the bucks kind of bachelored up in a food source eating, so those are always kind of fun to look at. One of the things that I wanted to ask about is just like the different applications. So like, I know you mentioned that the new camera is going to have really strong video. So like, what type of scenarios would you use the different type of applications that the camera has, whether it's video recording or whether it's time lapse or things like that? One would be certain situations when you would want to use those types of features.
Sorry, I had to help my wife get a possum off the porch there real quick. I had to disappear for a second.
Again, math, deer, and possum removal. We do it all here.
What was the question again? Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was just saying, so, the different applications, with the Gen 2 camera coming out, how the video, you guys are really kind of amping up the video. What are the different types of scenarios or situations where you would use some of the different features that the cameras have? So whether we're talking video or time lapse specifically, what are times or locations you would use those types of features?
Absolutely. The biggest thing for me is that 95% of the time, and I'm probably biased because we do a lot of big woods hunting again, and my cameras are staying on photo most of the time. And if I'm in serious hunting mode and I'm checking a camera and I'm relying on that data to tell me where to spend my time and which stand to be in, it's almost always on regular photo detection mode. It's just because that's the most, I guess, economical or practical way to go through a lot of data and do it in a fast way. Time lapse is great, I think, for turkey season. Use time lapse a lot in turkey season just to see when birds are out strutting, when they're hitting those openings. It can be beneficial for early season food plot monitoring and deer season too. my biggest thing is it depends on what kind of hunting you're doing, because like for us, and for instance, what we do, we're usually dialing in on 2 to 4 big mature deer and special deer that we've kind of developed history with. And it's time-lapse feature really just doesn't help me much in that sense, because it's telling me when deer are in a certain space. It's not telling me when a certain deer is in a certain space. And I think that kind of dictates why we do what we do. But if I was, if I was kind of a small parcel guy, and I had food plots and that kind of thing, and wanted to get kids out and maybe have somebody harvest a doe and that kind of stuff, I think time lapse would come in a lot more handy for monitoring food plots in the early season. It definitely for me comes in for watching turkey strut zones and seeing what time of the day turkeys are getting in. Because we got some openings on some of the public land out here that's really large, and I can't cover it with a detection circuit. That's where that time lapse really helps.
Right.
Video mode to me is just freaking cool, and that's why we like them. And we're fortunate in the fact that we have access to a few cameras, and we have cameras that we can put out just to take videos. What I don't like about videos in a hunting sense is the fact that they're cumbersome to go through. If I'm slipping out, 4 a.m. To go to stand, and I'm pulling cameras that night before to try to decide where I want to go, I don't want to watch through 3 hours of videos to see, what bucks were where and when. I want to be able to kind of lightning fast go through pictures. On the other hand, sometimes it's really freaking cool to see a giant deer to scrape in broad daylight, working up the earth a little bit, and that's part of just kind of figuring out what works for you. I think we have a hybrid mode, so it takes a photo and then immediately starts taking a video. That has worked out really well for us at certain times, where it's like, yeah, I like getting really cool videos, big bucks, but at the same time, I need to know what's going on, and I need to know fast. You pull that card, you put it on the computer, and you separate it by file type, to where all your videos are on one side and all of your photos are on the other side, and you can go through that data pretty fast.
Right.
But for the most part, honestly, 95% of the time it's photo mode, and when it's very serious and we're kind of surgically looking at what deer we want to take, it really comes down to photo mode.
Right.
So
yeah.
That's I think that's probably the short answer for that. We could talk a lot more about other scenarios, but.
Right, yeah, I mainly use photo mode for the most part. I did recently use time-lapse mode, and that was kind of, Matt, to your point, it was a piece of public land that I had scouted, and I happened to kind of come across Pennsylvania actually put in a food plot and was doing some habitat management in an area, and I just kind of stumbled across it, and it seemed like a really good spot. I saw a lot of deer signs. I actually hung a camera and put it on that time-lapse mode to kind of do what you were saying. It's like my first objective was really like, are deer hitting this, and if so, where are they coming out? Like, how are they getting here? That way I could start to kind of like backtrack where they might be, bedding or the route that they're using to get to the food source. But you're right, it's like you can't, it becomes a challenge to try to pinpoint anything. It's more of it's a large swath of reconnaissance that it'll allow you to do, so it kind of gives you a large picture, and then for me at least, it helps me kind of then whittle down where I'm going to next from that perspective. So as far as scent control goes, are you guys kind of super stringent about your scent control when checking and placing cameras, or what do you guys usually do in that regard?
Yes and no. Throughout the summer, early season, we don't get too crazy. We always try to keep our eye on the weather, and if for whatever reason, if there's a storm rolling in, or if there's rain showers on the then we'll try to sneak in and check as many cameras as we can. But outside of that, we're not wearing rubber gloves or latex gloves, and we do our usual rubber boots. A lot of times we'll spray down or wear our scent-free clothing in and out to check cameras. But a lot of times it's for us, it's more about access, where we have those cameras placed. Not walking through bedding, trying to access those cameras in ways that we're not going to bump deer, and deer aren't going to cross our path, at least for in the immediate future. So we're not you hear stories about guys who are wearing rubber boots and latex gloves, and they're spraying down, and they do they're a little bit extreme, and So I guess we're a little bit lax on that. But also, we're not typically in a day, we're not going and checking 5 or 6 cameras. We have 20 or 30 cameras to check. So we, as Matt mentioned, we run a very large number of cameras, and a lot of times the cameras that are maybe a little more intrusive, a lot of times we won't even check those. We'll just let them run through the entire season and collect the data at the end of the season, and kind of use the data that camera's giving us for the following year.
Right. Yeah.
And I think one of the things too with what we do is that it is, Clint, you living in Pennsylvania, you probably understand, but the places in Ohio that we hunt are extremely weird, rugged terrain, and you go check one camera down here and you're a sweaty mess, and you can't kind of get around that. So I think it's almost kind of, I don't know, I've got this weird thing where I kind of think that deer know us individually by our scent. I really believe that, and I feel like the more that we can kind of be in there and not kind of cause harm, the better. And it's like, then obviously once season comes in, we're trying to be really cautious about our scent and not lay it down everywhere. I don't know. I'd like to think that the more time that we spend with these animals' environment, we're not hurting them. That maybe they kind of get a little more used to us too.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I mean, you mentioned that you think they know us by like our specific scent. I would 100% agree with you. I forget who I was talking to or listening to the one day. Oh, it was actually I forget his name. Neil Daughtry, I think is his name. His dad. He owns a habitat like a consulting service, and his dad was a big writer. I think he still writes for Outdoor Life, if I'm not mistaken. And that was one thing that he says, their olfactory senses, that they can actually detect not just that a deer was here or that a human was here, but they can actually tell like that it's oh, this is Chad, or this is Matt, or this is Clint, it's this deer Bob, I met him in a food plot last week. It's like they actually get down to like the molecular level to where they can actually tell which person they're scenting essentially. I kind of follow.
Well, they can definitely do it with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why wouldn't they be able to do it with us?
Yeah, I kind of follow the same suit. It's like I'm not too concerned about scent early in the year. As the year goes, I get a little bit more concerned about it. The other thing I do is I place some of them, if it's some of the terrain, I'm fortunate it's not quite as rugged as what you guys are encountering. If it is a food plot, it's like I'll make sure it's somewhere where I can get to it with a truck or an ATV where I can just kind of ride up to it. The other ones, to your point, if they're kind of deeper into the property, I may not check them till the end of the season, or if I do, it's like I'll put them in the summer. Then I might do a pool, at the beginning of October, and that might be the only time I look at that card. But so for the most part, I kind of follow the same suit. So you mentioned you're running, up to maybe 30 cameras. So what's kind of your camera density philosophy when it comes to like so many cameras per 100 acres? Do you have kind of a rule of thumb for that?
Well, I'll tell you this much: it changes a lot because I don't know if you've seen, but we haven't killed a bunch of giant bucks over the last couple of years. So we're still trying to figure that out. But no, I think one of the things that we're kind of getting better at is when we started the company and we had access to a lot of cameras and you need marketing materials and and you want to get a bunch of pictures. It's like we put them. I mean, we had cameras everywhere, and one of the things we're getting better at now is instead of just getting pictures of deer, we're trying to focus in on kind of select areas where it seems like the most big deer are living. And once we kind of find those areas, and we found a couple of them this past year, when I shot that deer Caesar, that was one of those areas. And once we find those areas, it's like we try to kind of, and those areas are typically about 1,000 acres, public land areas. And we'll try to kind of cover the hottest spots in that 1,000 acres where we think that we can pick up deer. And that's kind of it. Sometimes that's a lot of cameras. Sometimes it's not. I mean, the big woods just doesn't lend itself to making deer very photographable, I guess, or photogenic. So there's certain areas, like there's one spot I found this past year, and when you dial into where we had our cameras in about a 400-yard or a 400-acre radius, and I had probably 10 cameras in that 400 acres, and there were 3 different deer over 150 inches that were using this 300 or 400 acres, and each of them was kind of using a different corner of it. So then I consistently moved these cameras around, because in the big woods, these deer are just constantly moving. I mean, they're changing day in and day out based on the food sources. And so this was my first year in that spot, and I still haven't quite figured it out, but I know that there are 3 deer that have now made it through that I have a lot more data of now. Next year, I'm not going to go back to those same spots, because I'm pretty confident that those deer will be back in those same spots. I'm going to kind of let the cameras run in those same spots, and I'm going to move new cameras around on the outskirts of where I think that they're at, to try to kind of dial in where their core areas, where their home range is, we're constantly moving cameras. Whereas in other spots, the spot where I shot that Caesar buck this year, I think we had 3 or 4 cameras in there, because the year before I had 10. And I learned a lot about that deer and another deer that lived in that area. And it's almost like the second year was almost like maintenance. Like we just kind of reconfirmed what we thought we already knew. Mm-hmm. I feel like once we learn what a deer really likes to do, the next year, we don't need to get as kind of invasive, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. So you kind of just slowly kind of tighten the circle down on him, right? And it's kind of like your approach.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, that's exactly the approach. And then we try to do over the course of a season, and then the following season, it's almost like, okay, we sit back and wait, and then we go into kill. And that's what happened this year. We just didn't find a deer. And I think next year the same thing hopefully will happen with this other area where we've got some good bucks. And then Chad's got a spot where he's got 3 really good deer.
Nice. Now, is this a separate area of Ohio? A different area other than where that you're talking about, Matt?
Yeah, a few miles. We kind of like to hunt in this one kind of 30 miles from my house. Chad comes down and hangs out, and we try to stay somewhat close to my place. And it's funny because everybody thinks there's a lot of big deer in Ohio, but we've run cameras in some areas where we never get a picture of a big deer. So we've tried to find the best spot.
Right. So one thing I'm always curious about there's always a big debate about is the type of flash that people prefer. So I guess this is a 2-part question. 1, preference of flash, and 2, do you either know or do you think that the different types of flash have different impacts on deer and their behavior?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and you know, depending on who you ask, you get a different answer every single time. But for us, it's absolutely black flash. That's all that we use. And in the big wood settings that we're in, you know, there's a lot of, you know, every deer is an individual. They all react to things differently, but the one consistent thing that we find is that they just don't put up with a whole lot of intrusion. So everything we do, we try to be, you know, on the camera end of things, discreet as possible. So it's absolutely black flash. That's all that we use. That's all that, you know, that's all that we manufacture. As far as, you know, deer having reactions to different flash, I personally believe it. I've used Red Glow IR cameras, red flash cameras, and have, you know, seen deer look at the camera and then never show up in that spot again. Whether, you know, it was a camera, mechanical noise, whatever it was, maybe that deer's just, you know, skirting the camera. But we do find, you know, back in 2015 when we were initially developing the last our debut camera, you know, doing the side-by-side test with other makes and models on the industry, some of those being red flash, we absolutely got more pictures with black flash cameras versus red flash. And, you know, there's a lot of guys that, or I shouldn't say a lot, but there are some guys that will argue that, and they, you know, they say that the flash, whether it's white or red, you know, doesn't bother their deer. And I would probably say that's probably true. You know, all these animals have their own personalities. all react to things differently. So it's hard to kind of give an answer that fits in the shoebox for everybody. So,
and then too, Chad, it's like we talk about this all the time. It's like these guys, and here's the thing: Iowa and Illinois and Kansas, those are different places, and those are different deer than the kind of deer that we hunt in Appalachia. And Chad and I talk about this a lot. It's like, but even still, like, take me to Iowa. What about that one cagey old buck that gets one look at a red flash camera, and you don't even ever get a picture of because he never stepped in the frame, and you never get a picture of, like, why would you take the chance? Like, when we're trying to put all the odds in our favor of killing these big mature deer, like, why risk it? You know, and that's what I don't understand about the argument. Yeah. Black flash cameras used to be really poor picture quality, but with some of the stuff we've done over the last couple of years, there's really a lot of times side by side you can't tell the difference in picture quality. So at this point, I don't understand the need for red flash cameras. I get the white flash, you know, nighttime picture thing, and that's great. But if your true goal is just to kill big mature deer, man, I don't understand the risk. Why take that risk?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a couple of years ago there was one particular buck that was on the family farm for Pennsylvania. He was a nice looking buck. I got one picture of him. Well, I got two pictures of him, but one with two separate cameras. One was in a food source, which was a black flash camera, and then I got another picture of him down on this creek bottom, which I kind of thought is where he was living, was down in that area. It's super nasty thick. Got one picture of him. It was not a black flash camera. He was looking directly at the camera whenever when the photo was taken, and I never saw that buck on camera again. That was the last time I saw him. Yep. So that kind of cured me pretty quickly. That, and I think the other thing too, Matt, I think you made a good point, is depending on where you're hunting too, I think deer may tolerate things a little bit more, or be a little bit more accepting. Like, for example, you know, Pennsylvania, pretty high hunting pressure, you know, especially if you're on public land, and even if you're on a lot of private land, particularly if you're in like central PA and heading toward the eastern part of the state, where I think the bucks in those areas are probably just a little bit more wary of seeing cameras, because imagine how many they probably encounter during the course of their brief life, considering that many of them, if they're lucky, will make it to 3.5. You know, to where, you know, put that against, you know, a buck maybe in, to your point, in Iowa, that maybe, say he's a 3.5-year-old deer. He's probably seen a lot less cameras and been intruded upon a lot less than the one in Pennsylvania. Like, yeah, I think that some of that plays into it too, because I've even had deer in PA walk toward my tree stand, and then I see them looking up the trees as they're walking. Like, they literally know to look up the tree, which, you know, I know just in my encounter in Ohio, I had deer all around me, and it was just just one state away was a huge difference in terms of how the deer responded, and whether or not they were on high alert, whether, you know, they were concerned if there were people around or not. So I think that might be something that plays into it too. What do you think?
100% agree.
Yeah. So I have kind of a selfish question here, which is, I know I mentioned just a little bit ago, my dad picked up a piece of property that's going to help him scout this weekend. And it's not a huge parcel. It's 53 acres, which is great. And my dad will be able to come back to PA and hunt. He lives in North Carolina, so it'll be good to get some hunting time in with my dad again. So for small acreage, you know, pieces of land, you know, one of the things that, you know, is kind of, I think my dad has a concern with, is kind of two things. Is one, he lives 7 hours away from it. I live 3 hours away from it. So trespassing is a concern for him. So for small acreage, you know, parcels of land, you know, what are your tips in terms of using trail cameras for to deter trespassing?
Well, I think there's probably a couple things there. One, the biggest thing is being able to use your cameras to monitor any kind of access, whether it be ATV trails, a gate, you know, entrance road, oil well road, anything like that, to kind of solidify, you know, who else could be using the easiest access points to that property. And then I think the other thing is really just know your neighbors before you go out and start setting cameras up. I know that's maybe an odd thing to do, but if you kind of have an idea of what kind of people you're surrounded by, you may be able to, not use those cameras for security and use them, actually put them to work for you. But anywhere there's easy foot traffic, I mean, it's not a super hard thing to think about, really. And also, one quick tip, what I like to do on a lot of private pieces, especially you mentioned mineral sites and bait stations earlier, Clint, is getting those cameras elevated out of the line of sight of people. So if you do have any kind of trespassing going on, typically you walk through the woods and you see a bait station or a mineral site. In today's age, obviously most folks are going to think, okay, I'm trespassing. Here's a popcorn or mineral site. Where's the trail camera? So that's one thing that we like to talk about a lot when people have trespassing and theft concerns about their pieces.
Right, and then the nice thing is if you have an Exodus trail camera, there's the theft policy too, which is always a nice little comfort blanket to have with you whenever you're putting your cameras out.
True that, man.
So I think, I've kept you guys for about an hour, and I want to be sensitive to your time. I know Matt is chasing possums off the porch and so forth, so I want to make sure that he's on possum patrol if need be. So do you guys have anything else?
Just come back. It scared the crap out of me.
Oh man, I have to say I don't have any possum problems where I currently live, but I would probably gladly take them for to reduce some of the neighbor strain that I have, if you will. But I want to be sure to be sensitive to you guys' time. So with that, I'll have one last parting question. And since we heard a story from Matt about the Caesar buck, Chad, why don't you take us on a hunt? I know we heard the last time we spoke, since you're a multiple offender here, we heard about the toad that you dropped. I think it was the first deer that you ever killed, and I saw the picture of that, and I got to say you're looking pretty good in that picture there, buddy. It's a nice throwback picture. looking pretty stylish.
Yeah, I get
look a little run down these days, but
I get made fun of pretty thoroughly with that picture. My the orange coveralls, the blaze orange coveralls, and the unibrow went a long way for my high school look.
Oh man.
I know, right? Hey man, you got the mountain, dude. Just take a picture of the mountain and send that back if anyone gives you any beef about it. I'll take that all day long. So, but if you wouldn't mind, man, give us the number 2 runner up to maybe that story.
Actually, yeah. We could go number 2. I was thinking kind of a blooper or a story that I mentioned maybe on the first podcast, just a tad bit, but probably about 7 years ago. I went on a DIY elk hunt on public land in Colorado with my grandfather, and they had been going out there since I don't know, probably the mid '90s. There's a group of guys that they hunt the same piece of public. Same camp, they go to the same trailhead camp. It's just kind of their getaway for the year. But with him getting up in age, I thought it'd be a cool experience for me to go out there and spend some time with him and chase elk around the mountain. So we went out. Actually, those guys drove out. They drove out, and of course, I only had 7 days off of work. So actually, I took 5 days off, but had the weekend before and the weekend after. So whatever that is, 9 days or what. Well, and so they drove out. I flew out. They picked me up at the airport, and that next day, I was still trying to get my bearings, figure out where I was, and I looked at some topo maps before the trip, but really went in with kind of a blindfold. And so as those guys were off hunting the first day, I was out by myself, just doing a little bit of scouting. And the entire day, I was kind of up on this plateau, I guess you would say, this really wide ridge, I guess. It was probably several hundred yards across the top. It's pretty flat. And I just kept running into all these free-range cattle. I mean, they were Hereford cows everywhere. They're just wandering around the woods, just grazing, right? And so that afternoon, as I was coming off that top, I had found some sign, and I actually found an elk wallow about a third of the way down off this top, and I thought, well, all right, well, this is promising. It was all tracked up and stunk and had a little bit of water there, and there were a few cubs right in that area. So I thought, well, I'm going to come back here in the morning and see if I can't catch elk coming back up this point of this finger back up the bend or whatnot. So next morning I hike in, and it's just starting to get daylight, first gray light, and for whatever reason, as I was walking up on this flat down towards this wallow, I'd seen something move like out of the corner of my eye. So I was walking through these cedar trees, so I just kind of stopped and I was looking, and I seen some red legs come through the cedar trees, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm in these cows again. They're gonna screw everything up. Like, this is just my luck, So I stay there for a few seconds, and then all of a sudden, like through this opening of cedar trees, I see what I thought was a giant, this giant bull. And I'm a whitetail guy, so I can't really tell you how big he was, but I would guess well over 300 inches.
Wow.
And at this point, he's coming from my right, and he's only like 50 yards away, and he's walking directly perpendicular at me. Looking like if he stays on that track, he's gonna walk dead in front of me. So I drop to one knee. I get over by the cedar bush or the cedar tree, and I'm getting ready for a shot, right? So I'm trying to put my release on my D loop, and I just switched from a caliper style release to a single hook, and I cannot, for the life of me, like 30 seconds go by, and I'm just trying to get my release on my D loop, and it just keeps breaking over. And once it breaks over, do it again, it breaks over. The third time it breaks over. I'm like, what in the heck is going on here? So I looked down, and I was so tensed up. I had my finger, I was squeezing the trigger, actuating the release while I was trying to hook it on the D loop. So I'm like, you dummy, So I took a breath. Finally got my release on my D loop. I look up, and this giant bull is 12 yards away from me, standing broadside, out in the open. There's nothing in between us, and he's just looking at me like, what in the heck is this guy doing next to the cedar tree? Like, does he really think this is going to work? So I'm kind of staring at the ground. I don't want to make eye contact with this thing. And this goes on for probably, 5, 6, 7 seconds. And right, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm thinking, okay, as soon as he turns his head, I'm gonna go ahead and draw, and I'm gonna shoot for my knees. And right when he turned his head, he just kind of trotted off, just no hesitation, no pause, just turned his head, turned his body, walked directly away from me, down that finger timber, and never to be seen again. I tried to, I got on his tracks for a little bit, but it's so dry there that it's not like tracking a whitetail through a ag field where it's nothing but mud and dirt. So
dude,
on it and done.
Dude, that I'm gonna just say that I think that was probably just a little bit of payback for the toad you killed for your first deer ever. I think that might have been a little bit of Animal Kingdom retribution right there, is what I'm saying.
Oh, it was terrible. I went back to camp that night and I told that story, and those guys would not let me live. It's still to this day. I see some of those guys. It's been 6 or 7 years, and they still don't let me live it down.
I wasn't sure where the story was going at first. I was kind of really thinking, I was hoping maybe you would shoot one of the cows by accident. but then I did realize that you're an old farm boy, so I was like, he probably been able to tell the difference pretty quickly. So I was really hoping maybe a stray arrow, harpooned one of the cows, and then you ended up dragging or quartering out a cow because, it was, it was down. So you can do what you got to do.
It was, I know you've been out west a little bit, and you're going out west again this year, and being around those animals of that size, and I've cut a couple good whitetails and been around big deer, and typically hold my composure pretty well, but being around those animals of that size, it just did something, man. I was so worked up. It was crazy. It was insane. It was like, something come over me, and I just could not think.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things if I'm being completely honest, it's one of the things that I am a little bit worried about, is just exactly what you said, is being able to hold it together if an opportunity does present itself. Because, the deer I took in Ohio this year was the biggest deer that I've ever taken, right? But it happened so quickly that I didn't have time to get nervous. Like, I didn't have time to get buck fever, because from the time I hit the grunt tube to the time I let the arrow go, it was a total of 30 seconds. So there was no opportunity to, have it walk up and kind of watch it for 10, 15 minutes and get the jitters the entire time. And that's kind of one of my biggest kind of fears, is getting out there and having an opportunity with something, and then, having to sit and watch it approach me from 300 yards away or 200 yards away or whatever, and try to have to keep my stuff together the whole time, because just not quite sure I'm able to do it, to be quite honest. But we'll see. Well, hopefully things go well. But that's an awesome story, man. I mean, a lot of folks don't even get to see an animal of that caliber in the woods. You know what I mean? So I mean, that's an experience in itself.
Yeah, it was, man. And actually, we were out there. I was archery hunting, obviously, and my grandfather and his friends, they all drew muzzleloader tags, and that was the only bull that I saw that entire trip. I mean, it was, I don't know, you hear guys talk about the weather and the heat and water and how it affects the elk rut, and we couldn't even get any bulls to be vocal. I mean, the piece of public that we were hunting, it doesn't have a very high success rate. It's pretty low. It's pretty heavily pressured. Mm-hmm. It's one of those places where there's a lot of guys. You're going to bump into hunters. If you want to see elk, you're really going to have to look for them. So, being the first time out there and knowing that now, I think that I would probably approach that a little bit different. But you live and learn.
Right. Well, it sounds like here sometime in the future, whenever everything kind of when we have some time, it sounds like maybe we should do a group elk hunt. How's that sound?
Yeah, I'm down.
Down, Matt,
you
down?
You're supposed to come turkey hunting with me. You never mentioned that.
What's that?
I said you're supposed to be coming turkey hunting. You never have mentioned that.
Well, yeah, I'm planning to, man. As long as the invite's still good, you let me know. You let me know that when there's a weekend that you're free, man. Because I know you guys are crazy busy, and I'll be in the old Dodge Ram down the turnpike to your place to hunt some long beards.
Yeah, honestly, might have to move into May, but we'd love to do it.
Yeah, man. Just let me know. I'm totally down.
Yeah,
for
man.
It. I'm game. I'm definitely planning to come out in April to just to do some scouting, if around that public land area that I was hunting last year. But I'm definitely game to make another trip in May to hunt some Turks with you guys for sure. Turks and six strings, man.
Yeah,
I'll bring the guitar. We'll do a little back porch. We'll serenade that possum. We'll be all good. All right, fellas, I kept you guys long enough. We're a little over an hour here, man. I want to make sure I'm sensitive to your time. I know we all have little ones to try to get into bed and stuff like that, so I'll let you guys go. I appreciate you guys hopping on with me. I'll be sure to put all the information for Exodus Outdoor Gear, how to get to their website and so forth in the blog post show notes. Is there anything else you guys want to add before we get going? Any where can they find more information about you guys? Any social media sites?
Yeah, you guys can check us out at ExodusOutdoorGear.com, Facebook.com/Exodus Trail Cameras, and Instagram at Exodus Trail Cameras.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. Just want to thank Matt and Chad for joining us. Be sure to check them out and check everything out that's going on at ExodusOutdoorGear.com, and be sure to visit all their social media sites. While you're on their website, you can use the promo code TRUTH to receive a 10% discount off any of your trail camera purchases. And we've kept you waiting long enough, and I want to make sure to give out the information for how to enter to win a free Exodus trail camera. We're going to use the same steps that we used the last time for the last giveaway. 3 easy steps. So number 1, you need to like the Truth from the Stand Facebook page. Step number 2 is you need to like the Facebook post associated with this specific podcast episode. So that would be episode number 21. And third, you would need to share the Facebook post associated with this podcast episode number 21. You do those 3 things and you will be entered into a drawing to win a free Exodus Lift trail camera. I'll, of course, announce the winner in the following podcast, episode number 22, and we'll get in touch with the winner via social media to get your shipping information and make sure to get the product out to you in a timely fashion. But before I get out of here, I just want to make sure to thank each and every one of you for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher, and you can, of course, listen to us on Google Play. And if you feel so inclined and are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star iTunes rating. We'd be very much appreciative of that. And finally, I'd like to give a big shout out to all of our partners that make this podcast possible. That is Whitetail Institute of North America, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands. And until next time, we'll see y'all.